So I'm on to the transom finish part, which I have to put mahogany lumber bungs into the Akume mahogany plywood. And instead of using Type Bond 3, if you're going to use a stain, that seems to work a lot better. There's a little bit of a halo. If you use Type Bond 3, it's a little bit browner than Type Bond 2. And Type Bond 2 is rated for exterior, interior, but obviously not waterproof like Type Bond 3. But this is going into plywood. It's getting glued with a glue tight joint, and it's getting covered in probably up to 20 coats of varnish. And this is going to be done clear without stain. So I want to make the bungs as less obvious as possible, and Type Bond 2 allows me to do that. So I'm going to do that. So what I do is as you saw in the video, I cut my bungs out of some mahogany stock, and I try to find colors that are close to this. And then I take my bung, and this is the rounded end that's down on the bottom. I'm sorry, the top. This is the part I put in, and I take a paintbrush with Type Bond 2, and I put it around just the front perimeter that's going in. No need to put it on the bottom, because that's going to be where the fastener head is, and it's not going to screw in anyways, or hold. And it's a good practice, because if you ever have to go back in and get this out, which this one won't because it's epoxied under there and it was fastened in, but it's a good practice on other areas of the boat that you are able to get it out with that screw head being clean. And then I line up the grain, because that's what you do. Give it a little tap with my little hammer. You don't want to split it, because then you got to dig it out. And it's good to get it right out right then. Don't leave a split bung in there, because more than likely it's going to leave a crack on the head of that bung, and it's going to show as soon as you put anything on it, including varnish. So, and then I go ahead with a paper towel and I clean that up. The less glue I have to clean off this thin plywood, the better. I should say the veneer. And then, yeah, and then I go back and I'll show you how I do that. With some people use chisels. I have a really nice Veritas plane that I use. Once I get the chisel in there and get it off with a little bit, maybe a 16th proud, I'll go in there with my Veritas plane and clip it even cleaner. And or you could do it with a light sand. It takes a little longer, but I'll show you the different things I've done, and then figure out what works for you. So I'm going to finish this up, and then we'll move on to the removal of the bungs. It's the next day, and my Type Bond 2 glue has successfully fastened through chemicals a bung to my transom. I've done all the other ones. I just use a very sharp chisel. This one has kind of a little bit of a sweep to it that allows you to kind of really get in there flat with even a little bit, a hair of a 32nd above the plywood and into the bung. And that allows me to not really be right on the surface, but really close, because I'm going to sand this anyways, and I just tap it lightly. And because my grain is aligned, it comes right off. And you can also, if you wanted to, kind of shave it. I try not to do that, because I inevitably get too deep and I end up getting down. The grain might chase it under the plywood level, and then I don't want to do that. I've already got one that did that, and that was because the bung was not in straight, and I chased it and it went down. So I'm going to look at this after I sand it, and if I don't like it, it's too far into the plywood, I'll just go ahead and use, I'll take the countersink drill bit off and just use the countersink itself, and it'll allow me to dig that back out, and I'll just put a new one in. I have one up here too that broke off when I was putting them in, and I just, I'll just leave it. I always have something that I want to go back and take out and do again. So I've got two that I have to do that technique with, and I'll show you how I do that. So here is one of my bungs that is, it's below the level of the plywood, and I don't want that. So I take the countersink, and I leave just a little bit of the original drill. I bring my countersink all the way up. I leave just a tip on there because I want to be able to get that tip into the plug. And then I just slowly, making sure it stays within that perimeter, grind that out. And you'll hear that the drill bit hit the screw. And then because we don't have any glue on that head, you can now get that out of there. And you could even take that drill bit back a little bit more if you wanted, now that you've got a hole established, because you're trying to avoid, there it is, you're trying to avoid having a big perimeter in there that allow it to, the glue to become like a halo. So I'll just delicately pick that out, and I'll go ahead and put a new bung in. Now that I've got my bungs in and they've dried, I can go back with a block sander, because you want a flat surface. Even the spongy pads are just too much or too little pressure on the bung, because when I slide over that bung with this hard sander block and 80 grit, I want it to take off that profile. So I just take that 80 grit, and I've got little pieces of, or I should say little spots of like epoxy that I'll hit. So 80 grit is minimum to get that off. So I just come in and I kind of find a runway so I can keep moving left to right. And I'll have a mask on too when I do this, but I'm taking off the bung. I can see it just from the tone of the wood. And I'm just gonna work to not only, I'm smoothing the transom and all the nicks maybe, or the pieces of epoxy I've got on there, and I'm also getting the bungs at the same time. So it's kind of a finished process. And the reason I'm doing this so far ahead of the other, like the plywood on the deck in the dashboard, is because I'm going to need to have this varnished, at least with a couple coats of varnish, so when I do the bottom and I do this edge, I don't accidentally get paint on this beautiful transom, which will be clear. So it'll kind of protect it. So if I do get paint on it, I can always just, sand it off. So the transom and the dashboard, I'll be working on way ahead of the other plywood, just so I have some protective varnish on it. So I'm going to get at sanding this and get her done. So I've got the transom all sanded down. I used 80 grit just to get the heads. And then when I do the plywood, I'll do the same thing. I'll probably sand up the deck and the dashboard and the transom plywood, maybe up to 120, depending on the tone I want, the color. The more you sand, the more teeth. And so the more stain it would grab, and not in this case, there's no stain. I am going to do a couple test pieces and make sure that 80 and 120 look the same. But it's the smoothness of 80 is really good, but I'd probably go to 120. And then we'll go ahead and move on to the next project, which will be the rub rails on the front of the boat. I was not able to salvage much of anything from the original rub rails due to abuse and just rot. So I tried to use a steam bending technique with some 2-inch mahogany akume. Did not work. It's just too much there. So what I'm going to do is I had a piece of rub rail that had been formed by a previous restorer, but there was not enough, it had too much spring back, or it wasn't glued up right. So I was able to cut through those glue lines, which I believe it was Gorilla Glue. So they came out pretty good. and I'm going to clean them up a bit and then go ahead and epoxy them on a jig to that curvature of the bow. So I'll have two brand new rub rails laminated. Then I'll back out the angle of the bow has to be backed out like I did with the covering boards and rub rail, and then I'll have a really flat surface with a lot of meat to fasten and glue to the bow of the boat, which has uh, quite a drop in it. It's a nice flare, which is good for wave deflection when you're running down the lake, but very hard to put a flat surface on it and get it not to be messed up. So that's going to be the next video. Thank you for tuning in. If you're not a subscriber, please do so. It'll help you get the notifications. I usually post on the first Wednesday of the month. Back in the shop a little bit more during the fall, winter, and spring months. It might be back to my 2 week rotation, but I'll have to see depending on how far I can get on any different or any project that I might be entering on this or the Wondercraft. So I will keep you informed on that. And if you're enjoying the video series, please hit the like button. It's always nice to receive the positive feedback. And I will see you next time.